करुणागणगणत्वम् प्रप्तस्य काल्यन गुणानवास्य वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणरविन्दम् महाप्रभु कीर्तन नित्य गीता वादित्रमार्यान् मनसोरसेना रोमाञ्चकम्पाशुतरङ्गवाजो वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणरविन्दम् श्रीविग्रहाराधन नित्यनानं शृङ्गारथान् मन्दिरमर्जनादो युक्तस्य भक्तं संयुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणरविन्दम् चतुर्विधा श्री भगवत् प्रसादो स्वादना तृप्तान् हरिभक्षसान्ग्राम् कृत्रैव तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणरविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयोरभार माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपानां प्रतीक्षणास्वादनलोलुपस्य वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणरविन्दम् वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणरविन्दम् निकुञ्जयोनो रतिकेलिसेथाय यायालिभिर्युक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्रति दाक्षा अतिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्री चरणरविन्दम् साक्षादरित्विना समस्तशास्त्रे उक्त तस्तथा भायते वसाद्भिः किन्तु प्रभोय प्रिय एव तस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादा भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादा न गति कुतोऽपि जयं स्तुवां सत्रिसाद्यं वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् 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 नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद चैतन्य नित्यानंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद चैतन्य नित्यानंद हरे कृष्णा Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna Hare Hare Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare Jaya Radha Neelamadava Radha Neelamadava Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Shri Radhe Jai Radhe Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadrama Jaya Sudarshan Chakra Jaya Sitaram Jaya Sitaram Sitaram Jaya Lakshman Hanuman Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Lakshmi Narasingha Jaya Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Gauranitai Jaya Gauranitai Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Jai Vishvara Param Saprabhagata Chadisthatara Sivishima Istivan Gai Sabgacharana Bhakti Viranta Samaharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Pratishna Bhiviti Samstapakachar Vaishnav Siramani Patita Pavana Srila Prabhupada Ji Maharaj Ki Jai Shri Gauriya Guru Varga Patitu Dhari Ki Jai Shri Rupa Sanatan Bhakta Raghunath Shri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Guna Sadgoswami Prabhu Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ji Ki Jai Ananta Kuti Vishnu Vrindi Ki Jai Prem Se Koho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrindi Ki Jai Jai Param Dayal Sri Nityananda Prabhu Ki Jai Prema Nama Sankirtane Ka Janaka Prema Purushottama Shri Sachinandan Shriman Gauranga Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Gaur Hari Mahavrana Avatari Ki Jai Golokera Pramadhana Harinam Sankirtan Jaga Ki Jai Yoga Dharma Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai Brihad Nidanga Transcendental Book Distribution Seva Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopakutna Radha Kun Samakun Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrajabhum Vrindavan Mathura Dham Ki Jai Dear Lordship Shri Shri Radha Nilamadhava Ki Jai Shri Maya Purnavadvip Eka Chakra Dham Ki Jai Parama Karuna Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai Shri Purushottama Kitra Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Shri Shri Jagannath Swami Baladev Prabhu Smasmatra Devi Sudarshan Chakra Bhagavan Ki Jai Sitaram Lakshman Bhakta Hanuman Ji Ki Jai Bhakti Sarva Vigna Vinashana Kanishingari Bhagavan Ki Jai Jaganga Mai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Tulasi Maharani Vrindi Devi Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Shri Mathura Dharani Ki Jai Shamaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Gaurari Pramanandi All glories to the Assembly Bodies. All glories to the Assembly Bodies. All glories to the Assembly Bodies. All glories, all glories, all glories to Shri Shri Guru Shri Gauranga Haribo. Namaste Narasimhaya Pralada Krishna जय
प्रहलाद महाराज की
जय
शील प्रभुपाद की
जय हरि बोल। श्री वृंदाई तुलसी प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्राणि देवी सतवताय वृंदाई तुलसी प्रिय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्राणि देवी सतवताय नमः। वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रियाय केशव सत्य विष्णु भक्ति प्राणि देवी सतवताय जय श्रीमती तुलसी महारानी वृंद देवी की। I'm like singing, but usually we don't sing with karmic clothes in the kirtan. But you can do for today. So next time make sure you do it. No, I'm talking to you. You have the good, you have devotional clothes.
That's true. Yeah.
Namo Namaha Tulasi Krishna Preyasi Namo Namaha Vajarada Krishna Seva Pavo Yai Abhilashi Ye Tomara Sharan Lo Tara Vancha Purna Ho Kripa kori karo tare Vrindavana vasi Kripa kori karo tare Vrindavana vasi Moraye Abhilash Vilas Kunja Diyovas Nayane Haribo Sada Yugal Ruparasi Ini Vedana Daro Sakiranugat Karo Ini Vedana Daro Sakiranugat Karo सेवा अधिकार दिए करो निज दासी दीन कृष्ण दासे को ये न मोरा होय दीन कृष्ण दासे को ये न मोरा होय श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेम सदा ये न बासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये न बासी यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्म हत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणा पदे पदे Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. जय वृंदे देवी, जय वृंदे देवी, वृंदे देवी, जय वृंदे देवी. जय तुलसी महारानी, जय तुलसी महारानी, तुलसी महारानी, जय तुलसी महारानी. वृंदे देवी तुलसी महारानी की.
वृंदाय तुलसी देवाय प्रिय के सब सत्य विष्णु Bhakti Prade Devi Shatavataya Namaha. Jai Shrimati Tulasi Maharani Vrinda Devi. Beloved Krishna, I bow before you again and again. My desire to obtain the service of Shri Radha and Krishna. I will take shelter of his wishes fulfilled. Bestow mercy upon him and make him resident of Vrindavan. My desire is that you also give me a residence of pleasure grove to Shri Vrindavan. Thus within my vision I will always behold the beautiful pastimes of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of James and Subraj. Please give me the privilege of devotional service and make me on met servant. These very fallen and lowly servant Krishna praise. May I always sing the love of Shri Radha and Govind. Shri Mati Tulsi Maharani Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Kirstakam Ki. Glory to the Sri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart with the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes the fire of conditioned life of the period birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity at large. God expressed the rays of the benediction movement. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases the ocean of transcendental bliss and enables us to fully test the nectar for which we're always anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone can rain all benediction to living beings. And thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govind. In these transcendental names, you have invested all the transcendental energies. They are not hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness, you enable us to easily approach you by your holy names. But I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. Once you chant the holy name of the Lord in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. In such state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your cause of the devotional service, birth after birth. O son of Maharajinanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. Yet some or other are fallen in this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. O my Lord, what will my eyes be decorated with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant your holy name? Or will my voice choke up, and will the hairs of my body stand on end at the recitation of your name? O Govinda, feeling your separation, I'm considering a moment to be like 12 years or more. Tears are flowing from my eyes like torrents of rain, and I feel all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and it should remain so. Even if it handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me, he is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipful Lord unconditionally. Shri Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Shri Kirstakam Ki Jai. There are 10 offenses in matter of chanting the holy name of the Lord that should be avoided. They are as follows. 1, to blaspheme the Vedic literatures. 2, to consider the demigods of the Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma to be equal to or independent of the Lord Vishnu. 3, to disobey the orders of the spiritual master. 4, to blaspheme the Vedic literature or literatures and pursuits of Vedic version. 5, consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna with imagination. 6, to give some interpretations on the holy name of the Lord. 7, to commit sinful activities in strength of chanting the holy name of the Lord. 8, to consider the chanting Hare Krishna is one of the auspicious ritualistic activities which are offered in Vedas as for the activity Karma Kanda. 9, to instruct the faithless person by the glories of holy name. And 10, to have complete faith in chanting the holy names and to maintain material attachments, ignorant for understanding so many instructions on this matter. It also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve the desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let's offer most humble obeisance unto all the Vaishnavas.
They're just like desire trees that can fulfill the desires of everyone. And they're full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Vanchakalpatarabhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha Vaishnava Thakur ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityananda Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Om Aganya Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manodistam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tati Swapadantikam Pandeham Shri Guru Shri Jitha Pujakamala Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Saivaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishaka Nivitam Sha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nitinamine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nidvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Desatari Prestaya Bhutali Srimati Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Tinamini Shivasubhanavi Devi Dayitaya Kripabdaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Dayane Prabhave Namaha Madhur Ujjvala Premadya Shri Rupanuga Bhakti Da Shri Guru Karuna Shakti Vigrahaya Namostute. Namo Guru Harine Rupanuga Virudapa Apasidanta Dvantaharine. Namo Guru Kishoraya Sakshadvairagya Murtaye Vipralambara Sambhude Padambujayate Namaha. Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachitananda Namine Guru Shakti Swarupaya Rupanuga Varayate Guru Vir Baba Munestvam Nidesta Sajjana Priya Vaishnava Sarvabhuma Sri Jagannathayate Namaha Vanchakalpa Tarabhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Namne Guru Chase Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhakta Avataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Saktikam. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Chayatam Suratur Pangur Mama Manda Matergati Matsarvaswa Padambojo Radha Madana Mohana Divyad Vrindaranya Kalpadrumadaha Shrimad Ratnagara Simhasanastito Shrimad Radha Shila Govinda Devo Prastali Vihi Sevyamana Swarnari Shriman Rasa Rasarambi Vamsivata Tatastita Karsan Venuswaner Golpir Gopinatakstuyestuna Tapta Kanchana Gurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanustute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Shri Guru Pranama prayers ki jai. Shri Brahma Samhita ki jai. Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchitananda Vigraha Anadir Adir Govinda Sarva Karana Karanam Chintamani Prakadasatmas Alpavriksha Laksavrite Susurabhira Vipaliyantam Lakshmi Sahasra Satasambhrama Sevyamanam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Venam Vananda Aravinda Dalaya Taksham Parhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandarpa Koti Kamaniya Vishesha Sobham Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandra Kalasadvanamalya Vamsi Ratnam Gadam Pranayakeli Kalavilasam Shamam Tribanga Lalitani Yataprakasam Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Bhanti Kayanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vigrahasya Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vede Sadurlabham Adurlabham Atma Bhakto Govinda Madi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastu Koti Satavatsada Sampragamyo Vayo Ratapi Manaso Muni Pungamanam Sopyasti Yat Prapadasimya Vichintya Tatve Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Ekopya Sora Chayatam Jagadanda Kotim Yas Chaktirasti Jagadanda Chayayadanta Andanta Rasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindam Adipurusham Tamaham Bhajami Yad Bhava Bhavita Diyo Manajasta Taiva Sampraptya Rupa Mahima Sanayana Bhusa Suktaryameva Nigama Pratitaistuvanti Govinda Madi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasad Matpati Bhavitavis Tabirya Eva Nijarupa Daya Kalabi Goloka eva nivasata kilatma bhuto Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami premanjana charita bhakti vilochanena santaksa deva hidayesu vilokayanti yam shama sundaram achintya gunaswarupam Govindam adi purisham tamaham bhajami ramadi murti sukalani menatistan Nana Vataram Akarod Bhuvanesu Kintu Krishna Swayam Samabhavat Paramam Pamam Yo Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasya Prabha Pavavato Jagadanda Koti Koti Swasesu Vasudadi Vibhuti Binam Tad Brahma Niskalam Anantam Ashesha Bhutam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Maya Hiyasya Jagadanda Satani Sute Jaigun Yatad Vishaya Veda Vitaya Manam Sadvavalambi Parasatvam Visuddha Sattvam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasat Mataya Manasu Ya Pranilam Patifalam Smaratam Upekya Lilayatena Bhuvanani Jayaya Jasram Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Goloka Namni Nijadamni Tale Chatasya Devi Mahesu Haridama Sute 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 Te Prabhav Nijaya Vihtascha Yena Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shrististati Pralayasada Vasakti Reka Chayeva Yasya Bhuvanani Vibharta Durga Ichana Rupam Apiyasya Chachestatesa Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Kshiram Yatadadi Vikara Vishesha Yoga Sanjayate Nahitata Pritakasti Hetu Yasam Buddham Apitata Samapaiti Karyat Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Deeparchat Evahita Santanam Abhyapetya Deepayate Vivita Hetu Sanama Dharma Yastadrik Evahicha Vishnu Taya Vibhati Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yakarna Narna Vajale Bhajatisma Yoga Nidram Ananta Jagadanta Saroma Kupa Adhara Shaktim Avalambya Param Swamurtim Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yasyaika Nisvasita Kalamatavalambya Yajivanti Loma Vilaja Jagadandanata Vishnur Mahansa Yasya Kala Visheso Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Basman Yatasma Sakalesu Nijesu Tesha Sriyam Kiyat Prakatayat Apitadvadatra Brahmaya Esa Jagadanda Vidana Karta Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Pada Palava Yugam Vinidaya Kumbha Tvande Pranama Samayesa Ganadi Raja Vignan Vihanta Malamasya Jagatrayasya Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Agnir Mahiga Ganamambu Marudisascha Kalastatatma Manasiti Jagatrayani Yasmad Bhavanti Vibhavanti Vishanti Yamcha Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yaschak Suresa Savita Sakala Grahanam Raja Samasta Suramurti Rasesa Teja Yasya Gaya Brahmati Sambrita Kala Chakro Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Dharmo Tapapa Nichaya Srutayasta Pamsi Brahma Dikita Patagava Dayasta Jiva Yadata Matra Vibhava Prakata Prabhava Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yastindra Gopa Matavendra Mahosva Karma Bandhana Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti Karmani Nirdahati Kintu Chabakti Bhajam Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Yam Krodha Kama Sahaja Pranayadi Bitti Vatsalya Moha Guru Gora Vasevya Bhavai Sanchintya Tasya Sadrasim Tanamapurete Govindam Adi Purisham Tamaham Bhajami Shri Yakanta Kanta Paramapurusha Kalpataravo Juma Bhumischintamani Ganamaito Yam Amritam Kataganam Natyam Gamanam Apivam Sipriya Saki Chidanandam Jyoti Param Apitad Aswadyam Apicha Sayatra Siradi Vihishavati Sirabi Vyascha Sumahan Nime Sardakyova Rajati Nahiyatra Bisamaya Bhaje Sritad Vitvam Tamaham Iha Golakam Itiyam Vidantas Te Santak Siti Viralachara Katipaye Ishwara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha and Adi Radhi Govinda Sarvakarana Karanam Shri Brahmasamita Ki Jai Shri Guru Vastika Prayers Ki Jai. The spiritual master is receiving benediction from the ocean of mercy, just as a cloud pours water on a forest fire to extinguish it. So the spiritual master delivers the materially afflicted world by extinguishing the blazing fire of material existence. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet as such a spiritual master who is an ocean of auspicious qualities, chanting the holy name, dancing in ecstasy, singing and playing musical instruments. The spiritual master is always gladdened by the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, because he is relishing the mellows of pure devotion within his mind. Sometimes his hair stands on end, he feels quivering in his body, and tears flow from his eyes. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always engaged in the temple worship of Shri Shri Radha and Krishna. He also performs other similar worship of the Lord. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always offering Krishna 4 kinds of delicious food, analyzes that which is licked, chewed, drunk, and sucked. When the spiritual master sees that the devotees are eating Bhagavad Prasada, he is satisfied. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is always eager to hear and chant about the unlimited conjugal pastimes of Radhika and Madhava and their qualities, names, and forms. The spiritual master aspires to relish these at every moment. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is very dear because he is expert at assisting the gopis who at different times make different tasteful arrangements for the perfection of Radha and Krishna's conjugal loving affairs within the groves of Vrindavana. I offer my most humble obeisances unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master. The spiritual master is to be honored as much as the Supreme Lord because he's the most confidential servitor of the Lord. This is acknowledged in all revealed scriptures and followed by all authorities. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of such a spiritual master who is a bona fide representative of Shri Hare Krishna. By the mercy of the spiritual master, one receives the benediction of Krishna. Without the grace of the spiritual master, one cannot make any advancement. Therefore, I should always remember and praise the spiritual master. At least 3 times a day, I should offer my respectful obeisance unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, Patita Pavan Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi. So, these 4 days, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, we're reading from the Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, authored by Keshava Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. Yes, and we've already read somewhat of the introduction, but we're going to continue in the introduction, and this is like really very, very interesting information about Krishna consciousness. And it says, the subject matter of the Chaitanya Charitamrita primarily deals with what is beyond this material creation. The cosmic material expansion is called Maya, illusion, because it has no eternal existence. Because it is sometimes manifested and sometimes not, it is regarded as illusory. But beyond this temporary manifestation is a higher nature, as indicated in the Bhagavad-Gita, 8th chapter, 20th verse. Parastasmat bhavo nyo vyakto vyaktat sanatanam. Yasa sarvesu bhutesu nayatsu na vinasyati. Yet there is another unmanifested nature, which is eternal and transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. It is supreme and is never annihilated. When all in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. The material world has a manifested state called vyakta in Sanskrit and a potential unmanifested state called avyakta. The supreme nature is beyond both the manifested and the unmanifested material nature. This superior nature can be understood as the living force which is present in the bodies of all living creatures. The body itself is composed of inferior nature or matter, but it is the superior nature that is moving the body. The symptom of that superior nature is consciousness. In other words, talking about the soul in the body, in our bodies. And that is the source of all energy. But this is also explained by modern scientists. They know that when the blood journeys from picking up oxygen from the lungs and then distributing it all over the body and then coming back again to the heart, when it comes back again, it is rejuvenated by something. Well, that something is the soul. You have two souls actually in the heart. You have our individual soul and you have Krishna. So they know that the heart is the center of the energy in the body. But they don't understand what it is that is actually igniting the blood again with living principles to maintain life. So, if you think about it, it's very interesting because the blood is gushing through the body all the time. And it is spreading oxygen, which is absolutely necessary to maintain the health of the body. And whenever there's a lack of oxygen to any part of the body, you get cancer. And lack of oxygen to the heart, you get a heart attack. Lack of oxygen to the brain, you get a stroke. So oxygen is extremely important. But somehow or other, the blood is always circulating and spreading the oxygen and nutrients at the same time. And the heart is pumping. All these things are miraculous. And also, the body is making its own blood. And no one has ever been able to make a facsimile of blood. They make parts of it, but they've never made the full, let's say, full development of blood. If they did, whoever does that will become the richest person in the world. But we see that the body is functioning in a miraculous way, and it's not something that happened by accident. Right? So here it's saying that what's being talked about in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the whole book, is something that no other book on this planet has ever written about. In other words, deep, detailed information of the spiritual world and the inhabitants of the spiritual world. And you can see that the modern scientists, they reject this whole thing, all this information, because they have no way of measuring or verifying through their speculation or through their imperfect observations the existence of the spiritual world. So they are denying the existence of 3/4 of reality. The material world is only 1/4 of reality. And it goes through two stages. Sometimes it's manifest, sometimes it's not manifest. So it's illusory. It confuses people. Just like when someone you love dies, all of a sudden you get rid of the body, you're not going to see that person again, right? And it confuses people. I remember when my father died, I was confused. I didn't understand what was death. And when I first experienced it, I was confused. You know, he was there, and then they take his body away, and you never see him again, right? Or you see the body being put into the grave, and then you never see it again. So these things, that's the nature of the material world. It is, it's temporarily existing, and things just disappear, and you never see them again. So it's very frustrating for people, such occurrences. But there is something beyond this material world. It's the spiritual world where everything is eternal. And nothing is dependent on eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And we're going to hear about that right now. So it says, yet there is another unmanifested nature. When it says unmanifested, we cannot see it with our blunt senses. But when we purify our senses, we're able to have a glimpse of the spiritual world, which is eternal and is transcendental to this manifested and unmanifested matter. It is supreme and is never annihilated. When all in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. The material world has a manifested state called vyakta and a potential unmanifested state called avyakta. The supreme nature is beyond both the manifested and the unmanifested material nature. This superior nature can be understood as the living force, he's talking about the soul, which is present in the bodies of all living entities. The body itself is composed of inferior nature, meaning matter, but it is the superior nature that is moving the body. The symptoms of that superior nature is consciousness. Thus, in the spiritual world, where everything is composed of the superior nature, everything is conscious. That's a big point. Everything is conscious. In the material world, there are inanimate objects that are not conscious, but in the spiritual world, nothing is inanimate. There, a table is conscious. The land is conscious. The trees are conscious. Everything is conscious. So this is a major difference between the material world and the spiritual world. Here, only living entities have some consciousness. But trees, concrete, microphones, rugs, everything else is not conscious. In the spiritual world, everything is conscious. And there are rugs, and there might even be microphones. And all these things are conscious in the spiritual world. And that is shocking. We've never experienced such a thing. So now we're hearing about something that no scientist can access through empirical knowledge, through research, even through speculation. They can't understand the nature of the spiritual world. This is why there's so much ignorance in this world, and why people suffer, because the scientists, the philosophers, they put a block, they put a wedge between you and spirituality and God. They do it on purpose because they have no information of it. Therefore, they say, well, it's just like the blind man walking with a friend on a sunny day, and the friend says, you know, the sun is so nice today. And the blind man says, I don't believe it. Really? Why not? Well, I can't see it. So, does that mean the sun doesn't exist just because the blind man doesn't see it? No. Obviously the sun exists, and it's tragic that the blind man can't see it, but you can't reject the existence of the sun just because he can't see it. That doesn't mean nobody else can see the sun. Everybody else is seeing it. It's only the blind person that can't see. So the biggest blind people in this world today are the scientists and the philosophers and the teachers. They don't see 3/4 of reality. They only see 1/4, and even that 1/4 they don't understand. That 1/4 they don't understand. Right? So, there a table is conscious, the land is conscious, the trees are conscious, everything is conscious. It is not possible to imagine how far this material manifestation extends. Now, he's talking about the material world. He's saying you can't imagine how far it extends or how big it is. In the material world, everything is calculated by imagination or by some imperfect method. But the Vedic literatures give real information of what lies beyond the material universe. Since it is not possible to obtain information of anything beyond this material nature by experimental means, those who believe only in experimental knowledge may doubt the Vedic conclusions. For such people, cannot even calculate how far this universe extends. They can't even calculate that. This one universe, and there are billions of other universes, and all of them put together don't represent more than 1/4 of reality. The 3/4 of reality is the spiritual world. They can't even measure in one universe the extent and breadth of the universe. See? They make speculations about it, but they don't know for sure. For such people cannot even calculate how far this universe extends, nor can they reach far into the universe itself. That which is beyond our power of conception is called achintya, inconceivable. It is useless to argue or speculate about the inconceivable. If something is truly inconceivable, it is not subject to speculation or experimentation. Our energy is limited, and our sense perception is limited. Therefore, we must rely on the Vedic conclusions regarding that subject matter, which is inconceivable. Knowledge of the superior nature must simply be accepted without argument. How is it possible to argue about something to which we have no access? The method for understanding transcendental subject matter is given by Lord Krishna himself in the Bhagavad-Gita, where Krishna tells Arjuna at the beginning of the 4th chapter, Imam vivasvate yogam proktavam aham avyayam. Vivaswan manave praha manur itsvakave bravit. I instructed, Krishna speaking, I instructed this imperishable science, meaning eternal science, of yoga to the sun god, Vivaswan, and Vivaswan instructed it to Manu, the father of mankind, and Manu in turn instructed it to Ikshvaku. Ikshvaku was the first king in the solar dynasty of the earth, and Lord Ramachandra appears is part of that solar dynasty. Bhagavad-Gita, 4th chapter, 1st verse. This is the method of parampara, or disciplic succession. Similarly, Srimad Bhagavatam explains that Krishna imparted knowledge into the heart of Brahma, the first created being within the universe. Brahma imparted those lessons to his disciple Narada, and Narada imparted that knowledge to his disciple Vyasadeva. Vyasadeva imparted it to Madhvacharya, and from Madhvacharya the knowledge came down to Madhavendra Puri, and then to Ishwara Puri, and from him to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Okay, so this is a quick window into our disciplic succession, the Brahma Gaudiya, the Brahma Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya, beginning from Krishna, going through Brahma to Narada to Vyasa, and coming down to Madhavacharya, and then Ishwara Puri, who's the guru of Lord Chaitanya, and Chaitanya, the 6 Goswamis, and coming through Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Gorkishore Babaji, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and Srila Prabhupada. Right? So, this is how we can understand something that's inconceivable to us. It's called parampara. When the knowledge comes through sound vibration of pure devotees of the Lord who are great, let's say, scholars as well as pure devotees. One may ask that if Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna himself, then why did he need a spiritual master? Of course, he did not need a spiritual master, but because he was playing the role of acharya, one who teaches by example, he accepted a spiritual master. Even Krishna himself accepted a spiritual master, for that is the system. In this way, the Lord sets the example for everyone. We should not think, however, that the Lord takes a spiritual master because he is in want of knowledge. He is simply stressing the importance of accepting the disciplic succession. The knowledge of that disciplic succession actually comes from the Lord himself, and if the knowledge descends unbroken, it is perfect. Although we may not be in touch with the original personality who first imparted the knowledge, we may receive the same knowledge through the process of transmission. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that Krishna, the Absolute Truth, the personality of Godhead, transmitted transcendental knowledge into the heart of Brahma. This, then, is one way knowledge is received, through the heart. Thus, there are two processes by which one may receive knowledge. One depends directly upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated as the Supersoul within the heart of all living entities, and the other depends upon the Guru, or spiritual master, who is an expansion of Krishna. Thus, Krishna transmits information both from and within and from without. We simply have to receive it. If knowledge is received in this way, it doesn't matter whether it is inconceivable or not. Okay, so this is the way we learn about something that's inconceivable. Right? There's no way we can experiment and understand the existence of the spiritual world and of Krishna. That's why the scientists say, ooh, this is not science, that is mythology. Real science is what we're doing. But actually it's not. And even whatever science that is being practiced in the material world stops at the point where there's where you go beyond matter, and that is when you enter into the spiritual world. They have no access to it. Even other scriptures, very few scriptures have very sketchy information about the spiritual world. About the only thing that we know about the spiritual world is one, Abraham went and heard God. He didn't see him. He heard him. Muhammad also went, so-called, to heaven. He didn't see God, but he heard from the archangel Gabriel. And that's about it. Jesus came from the spiritual world. He stayed in the material world. And before he left again for the spiritual world, he said, now I'm going back to the kingdom of my Father. There are many, I'm going to prepare a home for you if you follow my instructions properly. Verily, I say there are many homes in the spiritual world. That's it. Nothing else. There's no other description of the spiritual world, neither in the Old Testament and the New Testament or the Quran or other scriptures. But here you have a manifold plethora of information about the spiritual world and about Krishna himself. There's no description in the Quran of what Allah looks like. It's just not there. And for the Christians, they have Jesus. So Jesus is considered the Son of God. Of course, the Muslims reject that, and the Jews also reject that. So there is some bodily concept. If he's the Son of God, then God must look something like him, right? But he's definitely a person. So the Christians have a little bit more information than the Jews and the Muslims. But still, there's no direct description of what Jesus' father looks like. And therefore, most Jews, most Christians, except the ones that believe Jesus is God. In other words, he is, at the same time, he's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So there is a bodily concept amongst those who accept that Jesus himself is God. But For others, especially the Jews and the Muslims, they don't have any idea of the form of God or the body of the transcendental body of God. Okay, so now it says, we should not think, however, that the Lord takes a spiritual master because he is in want of knowledge. He is simply stressing the importance of accepting the disciplic succession. The knowledge of that disciplic succession actually comes from the Lord himself, and if the knowledge descends unbroken, it is perfect. Although we may not be in touch with the original personality, meaning Krishna, who first imparted the knowledge, we may receive the same knowledge through this process of transmission. In Srimad Bhagavatam, it is stated that Krishna, the Absolute Truth, the personality of Godhead, transmitted transcendental knowledge into the heart of Brahma. This is one way knowledge is received, through the heart. Thus, there are two processes by which one may receive knowledge. One depends directly upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated as the Supersoul within the heart of all living entities, and the other depends upon the Guru, or spiritual master, who is an expansion of Krishna. Thus, Krishna transmits information both from within and from without. We simply have to receive it. If knowledge is received in this way, it doesn't matter whether it is inconceivable or not. In Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a great deal of information given about the Vaikuntha planetary systems, which are beyond the material universe. Similarly, a great deal of inconceivable information is given in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Any attempt to arrive at this information through experimental knowledge will fail. The knowledge simply has to be accepted. According to the Vedic method, sabda, or transcendental sound, is regarded as evidence. Sound is very important in Vedic understanding, for if it is pure, it is accepted as authoritative. Even in the material world, we accept a great deal of information sent thousands of miles by telephone or radio. In this way, we also accept sound as evidence in our daily lives. Although we cannot see the informant, we accept his information as valid on the basis of sound. Sound vibration, then, is very important in the transmission of Vedic knowledge. So there was once two young boys in a village. They were in their teens, and they decided to leave the village and travel the world to gain knowledge and wealth. So they leave on their own. They say goodbye, and their parents and their relatives and so forth, and they go far away. One of them dies, and one of them becomes a very educated rich man. So many years go by, and the family members are very worried, so they ask one gentleman to go and find the two boys and bring back information of them. So he goes, and he travels, and eventually he finds the one boy that's still alive. And he finds out that the other one died, and this one has become educated and is very wealthy. So he decides to go back and communicate this information. But when he arrives back in the village, and it takes him a long time to go back to that village, he gets a little bit confused, so he tells the family of the boy that died that he's alive and very well educated and very rich. And he tells the family of the boy that is alive and rich that he died. So the family of the boy that died are rejoicing, and the family of the boy that's alive are lamenting, you see. So we can see that Prabhupada's point is, if the disciplic succession is pure, then you get the original instruction coming from Krishna. And the result will be that you will become liberated from the cycle of birth and death if you follow it sincerely. But if you get wrong information, then your whole life is ruined. And you'll have to stay in the whole cycle of birth and death over and over again. And there's no guarantee you'll be a human being. So it's really serious to choose correctly who you're going to hear from. Because we don't learn so much by reading. We can learn some things, but not I mean, you can buy a book, how to be, all about physiology, and study it for 50 years, and even if you can recite every sentence in that book, you're still not going to become a doctor. You won't be able to practice legally. You have to go to the school, hear the lectures, pass the tests, have your internship, this thing, that thing, and finally you become a doctor. So reading is not enough. You have to hear from experts, even in mundane worlds, right? In mundane society. So what about spiritual society? Well, that's why Prabhupada, he titled the Bhagavad-Gita, Bhagavad-Gita Yata Rup, meaning as it is. The same thing that Krishna spoke 5,000 years ago is being repeated now 5,000 years later. And how do we know that? Well, if you read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita Yata Rup as it is, and you hear it and spoken by genuine devotees, and you have an opportunity to ask questions, think about it, discussions and so forth, then you follow the example of Arjuna. That means you understood. But if you read Gandhi's or somebody else's rendition of the Bhagavad Gita, and there's hundreds and hundreds of different people that have so-called written the published the Bhagavad Gita and given their own purports and so forth. For example, Gandhi, he purported that Bhagavad Gita is all about nonviolence. Now, that's not a fact. Krishna is pushing Arjuna to be violent, right? So Gandhi has put his own theory into and piggybacks on the Bhagavad Gita, because Bhagavad Gita is considered the number one text of Vedic knowledge in the world, especially in India. So therefore he chooses to piggyback on the Bhagavad Gita to present his own speculation, you see. So this has happened over and over again. The Bhagavad Gita was translated, I think, for the first time in the 16th century into English. That's, 500 years ago. So many Bhagavad Gitas have been there, and it wasn't until Prabhupada published his Bhagavad Gita, when I say his Bhagavad Gita as it is, that people started becoming devotees. Not one person became a devotee by reading all those other Bhagavad Gita translations. Not one person, right? And in a 500-year period, even though the book was extant, meaning it was existing, not one person became a devotee. It's only when Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita came out that people started going to Vrindavan, they started chanting Hare Krishna, they started Sankirtan, they started hearing Bhagavad Gita on a daily basis and discussing it and understanding that if you read Bhagavad Gita correctly, you will do what Arjuna did. What did Arjuna do? He surrendered to Krishna and became a full-time devotee in his whole life. Now, he was a practical man, so he used whatever talents he had in the service of Krishna. So it just so happened that his talent was he's very good at killing people, right? He's an expert at it, but he doesn't kill people whimsically. He only kills people when he's ordered to do it by higher authorities in order to protect the principles of Dharma, not in order to gain a kingdom or whatever. So Arjuna was incited by Krishna to use his talent, and it's very hard for a person to develop a good talent. It could take many years. But if you can use that talent in Krishna's service, that's the perfection of your life. Right? So here we see, every day we're receiving knowledge by sound vibration. Right? Like even now, many colleges, like, to go to college, it can cost, anywhere from, when I went to college, it only cost like, maybe, if you lived at home and went to college, it was like $2,000 or $3,000 a year. That was it. Right? That was in the 1960s. Nowadays, you go to college, it can cost $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. The top colleges in the country cost $60,000 to $80,000 a year, and even it can be even more depending on what level of living facility you have. But it's definitely very expensive today, right? And when someone graduates from college, especially from good colleges, they can end up with owing $400,000 or $500,000, a debt that they get loans on, and they have to pay it back. So, but nowadays, many colleges, especially the professors that have 400 people in their class, oftentimes their homework is, you look at this video on YouTube, take notes, and you'll be tested on it. So you don't even have to go to college anymore. If you find out what they're saying nowadays, you'll have to go on the internet and you have to listen to this lecture by Mr. So-and-so or one of my lectures, and then you'll be tested on this. So the whole IT world has changed the way people can be educated. You don't even have to go to college. You just go on the internet and look at all these different videos, and they have videos about everything now. You want to perform an operation. You want to repair your car. You want to repair your cell phone. I mean, you have all this information available. So anyway, it's all by sound vibration. Whether you sit person to person in a classroom and hear from the teacher, or whether you're hearing the same thing on the internet, it's all by sound vibration, right? And some of these sounds are coming from the other side of the world. You're hearing news about what's happening in India. So, therefore, Prabhupada says that according to the Vedic method, sabda, or transcendental sound, is regarded as evidence. Sound is very important in Vedic understanding, for if it is pure, it is accepted as authoritative. That means you cannot argue with it, if it's pure sound vibration. So what we're hearing in Bhagavad-Gita, as it is, and Srimad Bhagavatam, as it is pure sound vibration, and especially in Chaitanya Charitamrita. So Bhagavad-Gita is undergraduate study of spiritual life. Srimad Bhagavatam is graduate study of spiritual life. And Chaitanya Charitamrita is postgraduate study. I mean, after you got your PhD, this is what you study. That's how powerful this one book is. But you shouldn't jump to it. Okay, so then it says, the Vedas inform us that beyond this cosmic manifestation, there are extensive planets in the spiritual sky. In other words, beyond our universe, there are extensive, meaning infinite number of planets in the spiritual world. Already we can't even count the number of planets in this one universe, and there are many more millions of universes in the material world. Just imagine that there's a spiritual world that's much, much bigger than the whole material world put together, and with all the universes, and much more vast number of planets. So it says this material manifestation is regarded as only a small portion of the total creation. The material manifestation includes not only this universe, but innumerable others as well. But all the material universes combined constitute only 1/4 of the total creation. The remaining 3/4 is situated in the spiritual sky. In that sky, innumerable planets float, and these are called Vaikuntha Lokas. In every Vaikuntha Loka, Narayana presides with his 4 expansions, Sankarshan, Pradumna, Aniruddha, and Vasudeva. This Sankarshan states, Krishnadas Kaviraj in the 8th, this Sankarshan states Krishna Kaviraj in the 8th verse of the Chaitanya Charitamrita is Lord Nityananda. As stated before, the material universes are manifested by the Lord in the form of Mahavishnu. Just as a husband and wife combine to beget offspring, Mahavishnu combines with his wife, Maya, or the material nature. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad-Gita, 14th chapter, 4th verse, where Krishna states, Sarva yoni sukonteya, smurtaya sambhavantiya, tasam brahma mahadyonir aham bija pradapita. It should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed-giving father. Vishnu impregnates Maya, the material nature, simply by glancing at her. This is the spiritual method. Materially, we are limited to impregnating by only one particular part of our body. But the Supreme Lord Krishna, or Mahavishnu, can impregnate by any part of his body. Simply by glancing, the Lord can conceive countless living entities in the womb of material nature. The Brahma Samhita confirms that the spiritual body of the Supreme Lord is so powerful that any part of his body can perform the functions of any other part. We can touch only with our hands or skin, but Krishna can touch just by glancing. We can see only with our eyes. We cannot touch or smell with them. Krishna, however, can smell and also eat with his eyes. When food is offered to Krishna, we do not see him eating, but he eats simply by glancing at the food. We cannot imagine how things work in the spiritual world, where everything is spiritual. It is not that Krishna does not eat or that we imagine that he eats. He actually eats, but his eating is different from ours. Our eating process will be similar to his when we are completely on a liberated platform. On that platform, every part of the body can act on behalf of any other part. So this is amazing information about the transcendental body of Krishna. And obviously, he can do many, many things that we can't do with our material body. We would have to get our spiritual body to be able to do some of these things. So, then it continues. Vishnu does not require anything in order to create. He does not require the goddess Lakshmi in order to give birth to Brahma. For Brahma is born from a lotus flower that grows from the navel of Vishnu. The goddess Lakshmi sits at the feet of Vishnu and serves him. In this material world, sex is required to produce children. But in the spiritual world, a man can produce as many children as he likes without having to take help from his wife. So there's no sex there. Because we have no experience with spiritual energy, we think that Brahma's birth from the navel of Vishnu is simply a fictional story. We are not aware that spiritual energy is so powerful that it can do anything and everything. Material energy is dependent on certain laws, but spiritual energy is fully independent. This is amazing information that we're getting. And we can see how, as a principle, Atmavan Manyate Jagat. This is a Sanskrit it's not a proverb, but it's a Sanskrit statement, and it says, Atmavan manyate jagat. A person understands something by comparing it to himself. So that means they'll never really understand what they're seeing. They always refer to themselves. It's just like the frog in the well. When another frog comes and says, there's a big, gigantic ocean called the Pacific. And the frog in the well says, well, how big is he? Like, is it as big as my well here? He said, no, it's much bigger. So, much bigger? Well, wait a minute. And he takes a big breath and sort of puffs up his body. Is he as big as this? He said, no, it's much bigger. So he puffs up some more, and extends his body so much. How about this? He said, well, much, much bigger. And then he tries it again, and then it explodes, dies. Right? So the frog in the well is hearing about the Pacific Ocean from another frog. He has no way of measuring the dimension of the Pacific Ocean. But he's trying to do it, comparing it to his well or to his body. So that's the meaning of Atmavan manyate jagat. And that's exactly what's going on today. The scientists say, well, we can't measure what you call the spiritual world, so we don't accept that it exists because we can't measure it. What? Just because you can't measure it, you're going to deny it? That's not science. That's ignorance. See, there are many things you can't measure. Like, no one has ever seen an atom. Do you know that? But yet they draw pictures of it. They say it does this, it does that. They have electrons going around the proton, and you have other subatomic particles and blah, blah, blah. They've never seen one. They're just conjecturing. They're just guessing based on what you would call corollary effects. So what they do is they burst atoms, and they're cyclotrons, and then they see little lines of light or this or that, and then they make up a theory about what is the structure of the atom. But they've never seen one. Just like we need to understand that it's impossible. There are many things that are impossible to know because our senses are too blunt. So how can you see the soul when it's smaller than an atom? You can't even see the atom. How are you going to see the soul, right? And Krishna is smaller than the soul and bigger than the biggest thing. So this is mind-boggling for the scientists. They say, no, this is all mythology. We don't accept it. Because they're practicing Atmavan manyate jagat. They're trying to measure everything based on their own experience. And their own experience, just like the experience of any living entity, is very limited. Very, very limited. Just like if you're in an airplane flying over the Pacific and you take your camera out and you're sitting next to the window and you look out and take a picture of the Pacific. And then you go back to the United States and say, oh, I took a picture of the Pacific Ocean, right? Well, how much of that ocean do you see in that picture? Nothing. You don't see anything about the ocean, You just see just a big expansion a big expanse of water, but you don't see anything about the ocean. You won't understand anything. It's the same thing. They send these robots to so-called landed on Mars or so-called landed on the moon. It's just like, let's say, people on the moon send a robot to the Earth, and it lands in the Sahara Desert. So whatever pictures it takes of the Sahara Desert go back to the moon people, and they look at it and say, oh my God, the Earth is like empty. It's just a desert. Okay, we're not going to the Earth anymore. Let's go to Mars now and see what's there. See, that's the same thing that's happening. They land somewhere on a planet, and they send back photographs of what they see, or what the robot sees, and that doesn't give them hardly any information at all. In fact, George Bush, after spending billions and billions of dollars trying to go to the moon, he said, well, I think we're going to have to actually go there ourselves to figure out what's happening. George Bush he lacks the gravitas, if you know what that means. Anyway, he's like a country bumpkin, and when he talks, it's like he talks in platitudes, not in actual clear-cut knowledge. But anyway, what he was saying was true. You can't really figure out what's happening on another planet unless you actually go there, right? So they claim that they'd already gone there, but again, they don't have much information about the moon, and that puts into question the fact if they actually went. And so now, 50 years after they so-called went to the moon, they're saying, well, we're going to have to send a man back there to really tell us what's going on. Okay, so here we see that there are things in the spiritual world that we cannot even imagine, even if we tried to. But here we're receiving genuine information about the spiritual world. Countless universes. What time is it now? Okay. All right, we'll stop right there. Are there any questions? We'll continue again tomorrow. Any questions? Yeah, wait a minute. Get the microphone.
So Maharaj, obviously this narration of the spiritual world,
Yes.
When we, even for ourselves to develop faith, obviously by hearing regularly in these classes, we are developing more of that faith. But for somebody who's completely new, how do we articulate that, how this information has been revealed?
How is it revealed?
Yeah, in like, for example, in Chaitanya Charitamrita, as it has been described.
Well, it's revealed by Krishna himself. Krishna reveals through the heart of Brahma transcendental knowledge. Brahma takes that knowledge and speaks it now. He received it through his heart. Now he speaks it to Narada. And Narada takes that knowledge and he speaks it to Vyasa. And then Vyasa speaks it to his disciples who memorize parts of that knowledge. So he has different disciples, and all of them put together have the full knowledge, but they've memorized it. And eventually they wrote it down. So that's how we have it today. So it was originally revealed by Krishna through the heart of Brahma. And then Brahma vocalizes it to Narada, and Narada vocalizes it to Vyasa. Vyasa teaches, he has different groups of disciples. One group is expert on the Rig Veda. Another group is expert on the Shama Veda. Another group is expert on the Yajur Veda. Another group is expert on the Atharva Veda. And they memorize it. That's, just like I've memorized the Ishopanishad. There are 108 Upanishads. So you get 108 disciples of Guru, and each one memorizes one Upanishad. You put them together, you have all the Upanishads, right? So eventually they wrote all this information down because people's memory is not that good in Kali Yuga. That's how it came till today. Now, as long as you have people who don't change anything and add anything or subtract anything, it's the same knowledge that was originally spoken by Krishna. Whenever there's a deterioration of the knowledge due to, like, let's say you have 15 people and one person whispers something into the ear of the first person, and then the first person whispers it into the second person, and the second person whispers it to the third person. By the time you get to the 15th person, when you hear what he's heard, it could be completely different than what the first person spoke, you see. So whenever there's a breakdown of the purity of the information, Krishna appears and speaks it again. So the next time he appeared, he spoke to Vivaswan. First he spoke to Brahma. He didn't speak it, he revealed it through the heart of Brahma, right? But when you get down to 5,000 years ago, the whole chain of disciplic succession was broken. So Krishna comes again and speaks it to Arjuna to revive the sampradaya, and to revive the knowledge. And then, so now that's how we have it today. Because he spoke it again 5,000 years ago. He spoke it 120 million years ago to Vivaswan, right, the sun god. And then it was spoken again by Vivaswan to Manu, and then Manu to Ikshvaku about 2 million years ago. And then it comes down 5,000 years ago. It's broken. The chain is broken. So Krishna comes himself and speaks it again. The same Bhagavad-Gita that he spoke originally to Vivaswan. So that's how we know. And that's how people learn, right? You're getting information every day in the television, in the radio, on the internet, on your cell phone. Somebody is speaking in India. And, just like the other day, I got a communication that our temple one of our temples in Bangladesh, 200 Muslims entered and ransacked it, the whole temple again. It happens periodically there, right? So I've never even been to Bangladesh, but I'm getting information about what's happening in Bangladesh. And it's all by sound. So most of the information we get is just relayed to us by sound. So that's how we get it. So we do it for mundane knowledge. You get it also for spiritual knowledge. Same way. Any other questions? Yes. Give her the microphone. Oh, give her the microphone. That's all right. You're next.
You talked about Jesus today. Jesus came from the kingdom of God. How do we think he's connected to it?
Well, because he's basically saying the same thing as Krishna. In the bigger picture, he's saying that you must, he's giving an example. He surrenders to his father's will. And his father tells him, you're going to be crucified in order to absolve people who believe in you as my son, to become free of their sins. So he surrenders completely to his father and agrees to be crucified for the sins of mankind. So, and then what is Christianity all about? You have to surrender to Jesus, accept Jesus as the Son of God, and follow his instructions. So he is a bona fide representative. So what is Muhammad saying? You have to surrender to God and follow his instructions. And they have the same body of instructions because they're all part of the same religious tradition. You have the 10 Commandments. And Abraham goes up on, or Moses goes up on Mount Sinai, or this mountain in the Sinai Peninsula, and he gets the tablets of the Ten Commandments, and he brings it back and says, "This is God's laws. We have to follow it. We have to surrender to it." So, all the Judaism, the Christianity, Islam, it's all about you surrender to God, and you pray. Let's say their Maha Mantra is praying. So you have Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atmanivedanam. So these are 9 types of devotional service. So we emphasize hearing, repeating, and remembering. The Christians and the Muslims and the Jews emphasize praying. So the Christian has a book of prayers you could say every hour of every day and every day of every year. They have books. They have a book like that where it's constant praying. And the Muslims, they have their 5 prayers a day. The Christians, they're supposed to pray 24 hours a day, or at least 18 hours a day while you're awake. And my grandmother, my auntie, my great auntie, she had a book like that. She was in that book almost all the time, especially when she was older. And so they're, let's say, and they have their Maha Mantra also. That is there's a certain prayer that they have to say all the time, just like we have our Hare Krishna mantra. That's in Christianity. The Jews have the same thing, and Muslims have the same thing. So, what was your question again about Jesus?
I just asked how he's connected to Krishna.
Well, he's connected to Krishna the same way we are. He's a servant to the Lord. And he's surrendered to the Lord. And that's how we're connected to Krishna also. When Krishna says to Arjuna, Sarvadharman Purityaja Mamikam Saranam Vraja Aham Tvam Sarvapapibhyo Mokshisyami Ma Suchaha. Give up all your made-up dharmas and surrender unto me only, Krishna says. If you do this, I promise you that I'll free you from all sinful reactions. Therefore, you have nothing to fear, nothing to doubt, nothing to hesitate for. So therefore, that is what Jesus did too. He surrendered completely to his Father and followed his instruction. So he related. How do we know? By the symptoms, by what he actually did, by what he said. That's how. Okay. So you had a question. Let's let him have the microphone.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. My question is on the different expansions of Krishna.
Yes.
Like for example, Mahavishnu, like 9 incarnations. Is worshipping any incarnation is same as worshipping Krishna? Yeah. And also in one Bhagavad-Gita chapter, Krishna describes to Arjuna.
Any bona fide incarnation. Not just anybody, but any bona fide, and it's stated here, what you call the expansions of Krishna. The first expansion of Krishna is Balaram. From Balaram comes the first Chaturvyuha, Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. They're all Vishnu forms. Then from Sankarshan in the first Chaturvyuha comes Narayana. And from Narayana comes the second Chaturvyuha. Again, Vasudeva, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. And then from that second Chaturvyuha, Sankarshan, comes Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and Shiradakshay Vishnu. So these are what you would call incarnations of Krishna. They are Balaram is a plenary incarnation of Krishna. Mahavishnu is a partial plenary incarnation of Krishna. So there's a whole series, and they're all have the same power, or almost the same power that Krishna does. But there's slight differences. Like, for example, Narayana has 4 arms, and so do the Vishnu incarnations. Krishna has 2 arms. Balaram has 2 arms. Is there any difference between Balaram and Krishna? No. It's the same person, except that Balaram has a lighter complexion and Krishna has a darker complexion. That's the only difference. So this is explained as Prakasha and Vilasa and Prabhava and Vaibhava. So Prakasha means it's exactly the same. So when Krishna is dancing with the gopis, he expands himself exactly the same, millions of times, to be able to dance with all the gopis. Oh, well, as many gopis as there are. It's a large number. And then when Krishna is in Dwarka, and Narada Muni comes to see, he can't believe that in Dwarka, Krishna is present with 16,108 wives in 16,108 different palaces. So he wants to come and see it. And when he sees it, he's still amazed by it. He can't believe it, because Krishna is present in every palace with a different wife, and he has a different set of children, and then they grow up and they also have children, right? And that's the Yadu dynasty. And he's doing different things in every palace with his wives. See, yogis, they can expand themselves 10 times, but each expansion does exactly the same thing. Krishna can expand himself infinitely. It's not that he can only expand himself 16,108 times. He can expand himself infinitely. As Shiradakshay Vishnu, the number runs into the trillions of expansions, right? Because he's present in every atom of the universe, and present in every heart of living entities. So Krishna has unlimited expansions of himself. Now, we are also expansions of Krishna, but we're not on the same level as the plenary and partial plenary expansions. So there's several types of expansions of Krishna. One is direct expansions of himself, and there's 2 categories, either with 2 arms or 4 arms. And it's not limited to 2 arms or 4 arms, but like, for example, his form is Sadbhuj. It's a combination of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Govinda and Ramachandra. So count how many arms there are. So, Krishna is not limited by anything. So, now your question again was?
Worshipping any form of Lord, is it same?
Any bona fide form. So the bona fide forms I explained. You have Krishna, then Balaram, the first Chaturvyuha, Narayana, then the second Chaturvyuha. Those are all expansions of Krishna. They're all worshipable. Right? But then you have the demigods, then you have the living entities like you and me. So we are worshippers, including the demigods and us. We are worshippers of Krishna, but we're not worshipped. You're not going to worship your grandmother like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, right? the guru is not Krishna, but he's given the same respect of Krishna if he teaches the instructions of Krishna correctly. But he's not Krishna, but he or she is given the same respect as given to Krishna. Right? So, who you worship. So, in the Panchatattva, there are 5 personalities. There's Krishna, there's Balaram, there's Mahavishnu, there is Radharani, and there's Narada Muni. Or Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, Advaitacharya, Gadadhar, and Srivas. So, 3 of the personalities are worshipped: Advaita, Nityananda, and Chaitanya, worshipped as God. And 2 of them, Radharani or Gadadhar and Narada Muni, are worshipper gods, and the other 3 are worshipped gods. Okay? So that gives you a general idea. So you have Krishna, you have Balaram, you have Mahavishnu, you have Radharani, and you have Guru, or pure devotee. Narada Muni is pure devotee. So you have worshipper God and worship God in the Panchatattva. Okay, any other questions? All right, and we'll have Guru Puja. Where we worship Srila Prabhupada as the pure representative of Krishna. So he's given the same respect as we would give to Krishna, but we understand that he's not God. So after the Aarti, we'll have the homeworks. I think, let's see, Arush did homework. Is he here? Yes? And Shrestha did homework. And who else? Somebody else did homework. Yep. Yeah. Prabhupada did. Haribol. So right after the Aarti, you're going to sing? Oh, okay. Go ahead. Whoever going to sing.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma
Pandamui Savadana Mate
Pandamuni Savadana
Jahara Prasade Bhai He Bhava Toriya Jai Krishna Prapti Ho Jaha Ho De Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chite Te Koriya Kya प्रसादे पूरे सर्वा आशा चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जते प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जते वेद गाय जहाँ रचरितो पतिता पवाना जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा नमः प्रस्ताय भूतले श्रीमति भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी निति नामिने सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरा भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Jaya Vishnupad, Paramahansa Pararajagacha, Statarasati, Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantakoti Vaishnava Binda Ki Jai, Namacharyas, the Harirasa Kur Ki Jai, Prem Goho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivedanta Ki Jai, Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Samakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Shri Brindavan Dham Ki Jai, Shri Mayapura Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Ki Jai, Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Jamuna Maya Ki Jai, Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the Sambhava Devotees, all glories to the Sambhava, all glories to the Sambhava, all glories to Shiguru and Shiguranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, Patita Bhavani Ki Jai. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasna Bhuteshu Bhaktivedanta Swami. Namaste Saraswati Devi Guru. The lotus feet of our spiritual master are the only way by which we can attain real devotion. I bow down to his lotus feet in great awe and reverence. By his grace, one can cross the ocean of material suffering and obtain the mercy of Krishna. I only wish to have my consciousness purified by the words emanating from his lotus now. Attachment to his lotus feet is the perfection that fulfills all desires. He opens my darkened eyes and fills my heart with transcendental knowledge. He is my Lord, birth after birth. From him, ecstatic prema emanates. By him, ignorance is destroyed. The Vedic scriptures sing of his character. Our spiritual master is the ocean of mercy, the friend of the poor, and Lord and master of the devotees. O Master, be merciful unto us. Give us the shade of your lotus feet. Your fame is spread throughout all the three worlds. We take shelter of your lotus feet. Srila Prabhupada, Patita Bhavani Ki Jai. Gaura Premanandi, Hari Bol. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya. Give me that. So something very interesting happened this week. A lot of things happened this week. This one gentleman came to see me. He says, I have an emergency. I need to talk to you. I said, okay. I didn't ask him what the emergency was. So he comes, he says, I got a big problem. I said, okay, what is it? He said, my son has become a Muslim. I said, really? I said, how did that happen? He said, he met this guy on the internet, and he didn't tell me, but he started going to their prayers, and now he's completely convinced he's a Muslim. He said when he was 16, he was a good boy. You know, I took him to the different temples, and he would chant some bhajans and things like that. Now it's finished, he said. It's Allah, Allah, Allah. I said, okay, so why are you talking to me? He said, I think you can convince him. I said, well, that's not sure. I said, can you convince him? He said, no, he's not listening to me anymore. I said, well, see, that's the problem. I said, you could have brought him to this temple. That's why I said, wait a minute, why are you coming to me? Why don't you go to like Dikshit or one of these other people? And no, he said, I think you're the only ones that can actually convince him. I said, well, if you feel like that, why don't you bring him here in the first place when he was younger? And well, he said up until 16 he was okay, you know, but then I got busy, and the COVID came, and these things, and everything was online, and he met this guy, and the guy convinced him to become a Muslim. That's what happens when you let your kid have the computer, and he closes the door to his bedroom, and he can be up all night playing on the computer. You know, and he can meet all kinds of people on the computer. You know, he met this one Muslim preacher, and they know all the faults of modern Hinduism. They study them. You know, the caste system, the man gods, and so many things. I've written a whole book about it. It's called The Flaws of Modern Hinduism, and they know exactly how to convince a person to give up Hinduism. It's not difficult, because Hindus do so many things that are nonsense that it's easy to convince people that Hindus, especially young kids, to give up Hinduism and become a Muslim. So, wake up. This modern schools and the internet and all these different things out there, I mean, there's a battle for the mind of your kids. There's a battle for the mind of your kids, and it's going on ferociously right now, all over the country, all over the world. And I told him, I said, look, you're just nonchalant about your spiritual life. You know, you were brought up in India, and the whole, and the older generation that educated you to have faith in Hinduism. You didn't do that to your kid. You thought you did it, but you didn't really do it. You just go to the temple, and you come in, you have darshan, and you can go like this and like that, and you say a little prayer, let my business do better, let my kid pass the SAT, and you walk out. I never saw you sit down to listen to any of our classes. He said, you're right. I said, if you're going to bring your kid here, you have to understand, you have to be involved seriously in his education. And you have to put him in touch with people who actually know the Shastras very well, and who are going to spend, so you have to hear these Shastras every day. And then, if they hear properly from proper people, they'll become convinced. Now, this Muslim preacher, he knows all the faults of modern Hinduism. He knew exactly how to steer your kid's mind and bring him to Islam. See? And because you are so busy trying to make money, you're not spending any time with your kid. Your kid's in prime time in school and prime time at night with the Muslim. That's why you lost him. And and it's your fault, because you gave him the internet, you gave him the cell phone, and you gave him his room where he can lock the door And you don't know what he's doing at night. So, warning, caveat to everyone, better get serious about Krishna consciousness. I said, if you're not serious, why should your kid get serious? You have to be serious about Krishna consciousness. Yeah, your wife, husband and wife both have to be very serious about Krishna consciousness in order to give an example to your kids. It's not that, oh, well, I'm going to get him into Stanford. He's got to pass that SAT test and this thing and that thing. He's got to do the robotics and do this and do that, No, those things are not important. What's important is, does this child actually believe in God, and does he have scientific knowledge of who God is? Because that scientific knowledge of who God is not there completely in Christianity, Judaism, or Islam. But it's there in Krishna consciousness. But you got to be an expert in it. You can't just, think that your kid is going to imbibe all these things by just coming to an Aarti or just coming to a darshan and then walking out. Haribol. Okay. So, who's first? Who wants to read first? Okay, Arush raised his hand. Microphone's too low.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Allahu Akbar.
So the question was to do research on what is material conception of life and write a summary.
Good.
So my answer is, in the material conception of one thinks of himself to be the Lord of all he surveys. Consequently, he is always troubled by the threefold miseries of life. Once one knows his real position, which is
why is he troubled by the threefold miseries of life?
Because he thinks he's like God, basically.
Yeah, very good.
Once one knows his real position, which is the transcendental service of the Lord, he at once becomes free from the miseries. If a man has a material concept of life...
Why would we become free from miseries if he understands that he's the eternal servant of the Lord? Why? How do you become free from miseries?
By coming to the class, hearing from a bona fide spiritual master.
Yeah, but what happens is, if you do that, then Krishna personally protects you. If you don't do that, then you're under the control of the devas and the modes of material nature. That means you're trying to become the supreme proprietor of the whole world. So you become a competitor of Krishna, so you're going to commit many sins. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
The Krishna will personally protect you. That's how you become free from sinful reactions. And he promises it in 18th chapter, 66th verse. Where he says, Sarvadharmam Purityaja Mame Kamsaranamraja Aham Tvam Sarvapabhebhyo Moksisyami Ma Suchahar. He says, give up all your fabricated dharmas and surrender unto me. If you do this, I promise you, I will protect you from all sinful reactions. Therefore, you have nothing to worry about, nothing to fear, nothing to hesitate for. Okay, go ahead.
If a man has a material concept of life, he cannot attain the highest perfection, even though he follows all the ritualistic regulations.
Good.
Like in Christianity, some people follow prosperity theology, which means financial blessing and physical well-being are always the will of God for them, and that faith, positive speech, and donations to religious causes will increase one's material wealth. For example, you give $1, you get $10 back. We don't need to give up the material world, but instead give up the idea of the material conception of life. We should use everything in Krishna's service.
So that material conception is always making a profit. The profit incentive, right? So that many religions nowadays, they promise you, you come here and you will become rich and you'll become prosperous and you become prominent and blah, blah, blah. You get all these blessings. So the Buddhists give the blessings, the Muslims give the blessings, the Christians give the blessings, and the Hindus give the blessings also. The Satyanarayana Puja is blessings. You know, you're going to be financially very prosperous and successful. You do this Satyanarayana Puja. So all four of those religions have the same thing, that is material prosperity through religious rituals. Go ahead.
In Bhagavad-Gita, Arjuna wanted to give up material life, but Krishna said, do your duty. In Bhagavad-Gita 3.8, it states, perform your prescribed duty, for doing so is better than not working. One cannot even maintain one's physical body without work. Whatever material resources we have, we should use for Krishna's service instead of ours. Materialistic conception of life means thinking that we are products of matter, we are material bodies, there is no life after death, and material pleasures are life's ultimate goal. The Bhagavad Gita teaches us to use everything in the service of Krishna. When we practice bhakti, develop connection with Krishna, and do transcendental loving service of the Lord, it helps us achieve the highest perfection of life. I found a lecture by Srila Prabhupada on July 20th, 1966. So, in the lowest stage of our life, when we do not know what I am, I consider this body myself. This deluded conception of life, that I am this body. And when we have got to too much attachment for this deluded conception of life, that is called raga.
What's it called?
Raga.
Oh, yeah, raga.
Raga.
Okay.
Mostly people, generally, they are acting in this material world with this conception of life that I am this material body. So they are working whole day and night for making a comfortable life of this material body. So they are in the stage of raga, attachment. Oh, so this is the end of the quote. So thus we can be cleansed from the material conception of life by hearing Bhagavad-Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam from pure devotees regularly, associating with pure devotees, rendering pure devotional service of the Lord, and chanting the holy name, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Very good. What was that lecture?
It was on July 20th, 1966.
But it was on Bhagavad-Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam?
Srimad Bhagavatam.
What?
I'm pretty sure it's Srimad Bhagavatam.
You sure?
I can double check and tell you.
What verse?
I'll check. I didn't write it down here.
Okay. Let me know. Okay, next. Let's see. Shasta, you want to come? So you have Vidyanath. Yes, you're next.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Haribol. Hare Krishna.
So the homework was to research about the material conception of life according to Srila Prabhupada's words and write a summary. So, a being who has not realized his position as an eternal blissful servant of the Lord is under the material conception of life. Due to his illusion, he is thrown into the material world and covered by the throwing and covering potency of Maya. These two functions of Maya ultimately put the being into a cycle of suffering and disillusion them into thinking that they are independent of any God and that nothing exists out of this material world. Srila Prabhupada explains these two aspects of Maya.
Can you read that sentence again?
Yes. These two functions of Maya ultimately put the being into a cycle of suffering and disillusion them into thinking that they're independent of any God and that nothing exists out of this material world.
And nothing exists? Oh, okay. There's nothing beyond this material world.
Nothing beyond the material.
There's only material.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, Srila Prabhupada explains these two aspects of Maya in his Srimad Bhagavatam lecture on September 12, 1968. The nature's illusory methods are two kinds. One is covering energy and another is throwing energy. Nature is acting upon us in two ways. Just like somebody may think that here is a nice movement, Krishna consciousness movement. Let me take part in this. And nature dictates, why shall you go there? Don't go there. Better enjoy like this. This is a throwing energy, throws him from the path. And another is covering energy. Covering energy means a person or a living entity may remain in the most abominable condition. Still, he thinks he's happy. He's happy, just like you see many friends in the diseased condition on the bed. And if you go see him, how are you feeling? And he'll say, yes, I am all right. He's on the diseased condition. What is the meaning of this all right? This is also covering energy. These influential powers of Maya encourage material desires which pull the living entity into a cycle of suffering and force them to view the world using material designations. Srila Prabhupada explains this in the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, 22nd chapter, 28th verse. In so many ways, he, the living entity, is influenced by false identification caused by false egotism and being covered by illusory material desires. He distinguishes between matter and spirit. When one is devoid of such distinctions, there is no longer a difference between matter and spirit. At that time, the spirit is the only predominating factor. As long as one is covered by material desires, he thinks himself the master or the enjoyer. Thus he acts for sense gratification and becomes subjected to material pangs, happiness, and distress.
Okay, so just hold it there. So you're talking about this throwing and covering, let's say, effects of Maya, right? So go back to September 12th, 1968. Right? There's a sequence of what happens, right? So an example of the throwing, an example of the covering, what are they?
So the example of the throwing is that just like somebody may think that here's a nice movement, Krishna consciousness movement, let me take part in this. And nature dictates, why shall you go there? Don't go there. Better enjoy like this.
Nature dictates?
Nature dictates. That's what Prabhupada.
You mean a classmate or a Muslim preacher or somebody?
Basically, material influence.
Okay.
So the throwing energy throws him off from the path. And then the covering energy. Covering energy means a person or a living entity may remain in the most abominable condition, still he thinks he's happy. Just like you have seen many friends in the diseased condition on the bed, and if you go to see him, how are you feeling? And he'll say, yes, I am all right. He's on the diseased condition. What is the meaning of this all right? This is also covering energy.
Okay. Now before that, there was another sequence that you mentioned.
Yeah. So I say that this is something that I wrote. These two functions of Maya ultimately put the being into a cycle of suffering and disillusion them into thinking that they are independent of any God and that nothing exists out of this material world.
Okay, go ahead.
So these influential powers encourage material desires which pull the living entity into a cycle of suffering and force them to view the world using material designations. According to Srila Prabhupada in the purport of Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, 22nd chapter, 28th verse, in so many ways, he, the living entity, is influenced by false identification, caused by false egotism, and being covered by illusory material desires. He distinguishes between matter and spirit. When one is devoid of such distinctions, there is no longer a difference between matter and spirit. At that time, the spirit is the only predominating factor. As long as one is covered by material desires, he thinks himself the master.
Spirit is the predominating factor?
Yes, when one is devoid of such distinctions between matter and spirit.
Then how can spirit be the predominating factor? Should be matter is the predominating factor, isn't it?
I think that it means that when one sees the matter as like a covered spiritual energy, then spirit is the only predominating factor.
But he would reject the existence of spirit. Right?
Because it says that those who are influenced by false identification distinguish between the matter and the spirit. But when one is devoid of false identifications,
devoid of
yeah,
false. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's no longer a difference between matter and spirit. At that time, the spirit is the only predominating factor.
Okay.
As long as one is covered by material desires, he thinks himself the master or the enjoyer. Thus he acts for sense gratification and becomes subjected to material pangs and happiness and distress. Many of these material pangs are due to the fact that enjoyment is limited in the material world, thus resulting in cutthroat competition. Srila Prabhupada writes in the Nectar of Devotion, Chapter 3, either communally, socially, or nationally, everyone is competing to be greater than all others in the material concept of life. Like this, many restrictions and sufferings are imposed onto the living entity due to his choice to be independent of Krishna. Here's the list of some of those effects. The conditioned living entity thinks, I am this body and everything in relation to this body is mine, including home, family, and wealth. Number 2, the entity is materially attached and does not give importance to spiritual life. Number 3, the living entity wants to merge into the Supreme Personality of Godhead to become powerful or just merge into the Lord. Number 4, some living entities believe in the concept of voidism due to frustration. Number 5, the living entities are subject to the laws of nature. Number 6, living entities develop a fear of failure. Number 7, one does not think that there can be many activities beyond the material activities. Number 8, he doesn't understand the higher goal of reaching Vishnu. Number 9, he's eager for honor and wants to avoid dishonor. Number 10, people join fake religions and try to become an iconoclast. Number 11, people function always in dualities, success and failure, happiness or distress, honor or dishonor, etc., because they do not have a relationship with God. Number 12, they do not follow the 6 symptoms of serving Krishna. For example, accepting favorable things to Krishna, rejecting unfavorable things to Krishna, and accepting everything as the mercy of the Lord, etc. Number 13, they fight for false positions. Number 14, they want sense gratification all the time. Number 15, they are bewildered by the spiritual dimension. And number 16, everyone wants to be served and no one wants to serve. And everyone wants to enjoy their own race, country, wealth.
Very good. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Yes?
I found the lecture.
Yeah.
It's on Bhagavad-Gita 4.9 to 11 on July 20th, 1966 in New York.
So again, it's Bhagavad-Gita
4.9 to 11
4.9 to 11.
on July 20th, 1966 in New York.
Okay, good. Vidyanath Prabhu. Hare Krishna. We're going to call you Panditji.
No, Maharaj, I am trying my best. Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. Today's homework is we need to read the Prabhupada Vani quotes and we need to come with a summarization of what is material conception of life. The interesting thing, as stated in Gita daily by Chaitanya Charan Prabhu lecture, which I was listening, what we need to give up is not material life, but the material conception of life. The question is, what is material conception of life means? It means to live our life for materialistic pleasure.
It means what?
It means to live our life for materialistic pleasures.
Okay, lead our life for...
Yeah. it means to live our life for materialistic pleasures.
Okay.
In the beginning of Bhagavad-Gita, Arjuna wanted to give up material life, for he feared that his material duties would cause him karmic bondage. In responding to his concern, the Gita stresses that we can never give up all actions. That is Bhagavad-Gita 3.05. And that without acting dutifully, we cannot even maintain our bodies. Bhagavad-Gita 3.08. What causes entanglement is not action per se, but it is underlying motivation. Our motivation is shaped by our conception of life. To have a materialistic conception of life means to live for material pleasure. This conception is erroneous because we are souls, eternal parts of Krishna. That's Bhagavad Gita 15.07. We are meant to live in eternal ecstatic harmony with Him. To avoid karmic entanglement, we need to change our motivation and work in a mood of a sacrifice. That's Bhagavad Gita 3.09. When we offer our activities to spiritual reality, karma doesn't stick to us, just as water doesn't stick to a lotus leaf. That's Bhagavad Gita 5.10. Krishna is the supreme spirituality reality. That's Bhagavad Gita 7.7. Therefore, sacrifice for Krishna's pleasure is the most avoided form of sacrifice. Based on the above, the summarization of Vani quotes by Srila Prabhupada explains clearly when living entity entangled in material conception of life and explained in various purports in Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam and Chaitanya Charitamrita and many lectures Prabhupada has emphasized. Here I will try to summarize very high level because it's a very big lecture. Which are the things which I felt important? Then I am planning to summarize here. In Bhagavad Gita 1.29 purport, Srila Prabhupada states, when Arjuna Gandhi was slipping from his hand and out of material fear, namely loss of life, he becomes so impatient. All these are due to material conception of life only. The summary is, whenever we get fear, we can say that we can feel that it's because of material conception of life. It is clearly mentioned that in this purport, there is no fear in transcendental realization who follows bhakti. Bhagavad Gita 2.7 purport by Srila Prabhupada states again, the Karpanyas are miserly person waste their time in being overly affectionate for family, society, country, etc. in the mood of material conception of life. One is often attached to a family life, namely to wife, children and other members on the basis of skin disease. The Karpanya thinks that his family or society can save him from the verge of death.
There's one word I'm not understanding. It sounds like carpenter. What
Karpanya, Karpanyas. Karpana, K-A...
Kripana.
Oh, Kripana,
it's
sorry.
Not Karpana, it's the...
Kripanas, K-R-P-A-N-A-S.
Yeah, the Kripanas are very selfish people. Yeah.
Okay, sorry, Prabhu. The Kripana thinks that his family or society can save him from the verge of death. Again, Bhagavad Gita 2.41 purport by Srila Prabhupada explains, when one is situated in Krishna consciousness, all activities are on the absolute plane, for they are no longer subject to duties like good and bad. The highest perfection of Krishna consciousness is renunciation of the material conception of life. Again 3.28 purport by Srila Prabhupada explains, he knows his real identity as part and parcel of the Supreme, who is eternally bliss and knowledge, and he realizes that somehow or other he is entrapped in the material conception of life. Again in Bhagavad Gita 4.10 purport by Srila Prabhupada, one has to get rid of all three stages of attachment to the material world. Negligence of spiritual life, fear of a spiritual personal identity, and the conception of void that arises from frustration in life. To get free from these three stages of material conception of life, one has to take complete shelter of the Lord guided by the bona fide spiritual master, and follow the disciplines and regulative principles of devotional life. And again, in Srimad Bhagavatam in introduction, it was further suggested by Sri Ramananda Rai that attainment of spiritual realization freed from the material conception of life is the topmost achievement for a living being. Again in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.84 purport by Srila Prabhupada, in our material stage we can see neither ourselves nor the Lord for want of spiritual vision. But when we are liberated from the material affection and are situated in our original spiritual form, we can see both ourselves and the Lord face to face. Mukti means to be reinstated in one's original scriptural status after giving up the material conception of life. In Srimad
Reinstated.
Reinstated.
Yeah.
One's original.
Sounded like reinitiated.
Reinstated in one's original spiritual status of
life.
Status after giving up the material conception of life. Again, 1.8.47 purport by Srila Prabhupada. A man who sees knows well that the living entity is neither the body nor the mind.
Nor the what?
Nor the mind. Sorry. Neither the body nor the mind. But
nor the mind. Okay.
Nor the mind.
Yeah.
But is transcendental to the material conception of life. In 1.13.49, Srila Prabhupada again mentions there are two classes of human beings, namely the envious and the obedient.
Envious
and the obedient.
Obedient?
Obedient.
Obedient, okay.
Since the Supreme Lord is one and the Father of all living beings, the envious living beings are also its sons, but they are known as the Asuras. But the living beings who are obedient to the Supreme Father are called Devatas, of demigod, because they are not contaminated by the material conception of life. Srimad Bhagavatam 3.5.11 purport by Srila Prabhupada. People are most influential by the mode of ignorance, and some are influenced by the fascinate mode of the material nature. And under the spell of these two modes, a living being is controlled by the material conception of life.
What is the second thing?
People are most influential by the mode of ignorance, and some are influenced by the fascinate mode of material nature.
Passionate.
Not
fashionate.
Fascinate mode of material nature. And under the spell of these two modes, a living being is controlled by the material conception of life.
Wow. Okay.
And again, 12.6 purport by Srila Prabhupada. I am the body, I am this body, and everything with reference to my body is mine. This is the symptom of material life. In the materialistic conception of life, one thinks, this is my house, this is my land, this is my family, this is my state, and so on. And finally, in Chaitanya Charitamrita Adilila 7.33, again Prabhupada emphasized, Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Thakur has explained the term Mayavadi as follows. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is transcendental to the material conception of life. And again in Chaitanya Charitam Madhya Lila 8.193 purport by Srila Prabhupada, since material philosophers are situated in the material conception of life, they are unable to realize this spiritual prema. This is what the summarization from that Maharaj. Still long to go. It's a big one actually.
Okay, I get the idea. You used that reference that I gave.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was giving a lot of knowledge when we read that.
It's good, huh?
Yeah.
Thank you. So this material conception of life is based on false premises, thinking that I'm only this body and there's no God. When you die, there's nothing. So all the emphasis, therefore, is during the short period that you live, you should use every moment for sense gratification, And in order to have sustained sense gratification, you need a steady income. So you have to have some kind of job where you're getting steady money, and then you're spending all that money on houses, cars, gadgets, cell phones, vacations, whatever. And it's only all selfish stuff. So, but still, because of habit or tradition, you might go to church, you might come to the temple, you might go to the synagogue, you might go to the mosque, but the main thing is sense gratification, right? And dominating, and I am this body, and I, me, and mine, the aham mameti syndrome, I, me, and mine, everything belongs to me. So it's a very dangerous concept, and it's taught. It is actually taught in schools, and in the television, and in the radio, and the movies, and books. You know, everything is about accumulation and also consumption. So it's completely opposite the spiritual point of view, spiritual concept. The spiritual concept, you should live very simply and have time for profound thinking about the purpose of life, and then actually engage in activities that will help you attain the purpose of life. No one's interested in that. They say, well, when you die, it's all over, so I better use the little time I have, to have as much fun as possible. Right? So, but the fun becomes misery. There's such a thing in Greek thespianism. Thespianism means drama, and it's called the tragicomedy. It's a person whose situation in life is, it looks like they're happy, but actually they're crying. Because their life is tragic and comic. Comic is they're doing stupid things, and tragic is they're making huge mistakes and suffering. Right? So there are a lot of people like that. I mean, I remember one time I was looking at this old photo of the church that I used to go to, and there were a bunch of men in that photo. Some of them were my relatives. And one guy has a beer bottle in his hand, he's pointing like this. Right? In other words, his whole psyche, his whole mind is all about, drinking. And, another one has a cigar. Right? Another one shows a ticket that he won the horse race, So he's showing the ticket. And it's like each one is holding something that's all symbolic of nonsense. The beer bottle, the winning ticket, the cigarette, and so forth. So, and these are grown men, right? But this is where their consciousness is. The other thing is, one time I called up relatives that I hadn't seen for like 45 years. I had some relatives in near Boston, Massachusetts, and I looked them up because I liked them, and we used to go to their house a lot. We'd go from Philadelphia all the way up to Boston just to see our relatives. Right? So I mean, the original, mothers and fathers, they were all dead, but their kids were. And I got the phone number of the kids. So I called up, and I told them who I was. And they said, oh, yeah. And I said, how are you? And they said, okay. Yeah, we go to the casino a lot. And they just talked about the casino for about 5 minutes. And they said, well, we got to go now. Thank you very much. And I hung up. So their whole life is going to the casino, right? They couldn't talk about anything else. They didn't even ask me, what are you doing? They just, yeah, I mean, it's crazy, right? That's the material conception of life, It's just it's the casino, the movies, or the vacation, or and it's just all sense gratification. So it's very sad, and it's very hard to convince them that they're making a mistake, right? Because they're so set in their ways. But the only time they get a little bit serious is when they're really suffering.
Yes.
And then they get a little serious and they want to find out, why is this happening to me? But most people, instead of doing that, they take sedatives and they take different types of medicines to change their state of mind, and they're intoxicated so that they can deal with the suffering. So it's very sad what's happening.
But Maharaj, some people are very successful. They will never, they will realize. Some people are very
very successful.
Yeah, very
staying in the cycle of birth and death.
Right.
Yeah.
They will not realize you are
saying success.
Yeah, they will never realize you are saying, Maharaj.
Well, no, it depends how much you want to suffer. Sometimes people say, this suffering is too much. I got to find out why this is happening. But usually the way they deal with the suffering is taking some type of intoxication, so that they never really say, I want to stop this. They've stopped it by intoxicating.
Okay.
So it's no solution. It's just like, let's say you take LSD and you go on this trip, and when you come down from the trip, the problems are still there. Didn't solve any problem. In fact, it got worse because now they were like unconscious for a long period of time, and they didn't really solve the problem. The problem is still there. So the intoxication is not really a solution to the problem. But that's what's being given by doctors, right? So anyway, that's another subject. We'll discuss that. So your homework for next week is read the introduction to the Chaitanya Charitamrita. The introduction to the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And research the spiritual world and the difference between the spiritual world and the material world. Okay, so the introduction is just to give you a starting point, but you can do research also to other parts of the Bhagavatam or Chaitanya Charitamrita or Bhagavad-Gita, where there's information about the spiritual world and the difference between the material world and the spiritual world. So that's a very creative homework. Hari Bol. It's not a 5-minute homework.
Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Gopal Krishna, what is your question?
Yeah, please come.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I have a question. I have two questions.
Okay.
So the first question.
Show me the fingers. How many?
The first question is, what does dharma mean?
What is what?
Dharma mean.
Dharma.
Oh, what does, you're saying dharma, it's dharma. What does dharma mean? Okay.
Yeah.
Dharma means the laws of God.
Okay.
That you have to follow. Okay? You have to wake up early, you have to go to sleep early, you have to chant your rounds, you have to not eat meat or gamble or any of those things, and all those principles of Krishna consciousness, that's dharma. Okay? And the second question.
What does annuous mean?
What did you say? I didn't understand what you said.
Envious.
What?
Envious.
Oh, envious. Okay. Envious means somebody has something that you don't have, and you want to get that also, right?
Okay.
But that's actually jealousy. But envious means you want to get what they have, and you want to take away from them what they have.
Hmm?
So envious is worse than jealousy. It's like the worst thing in the world. So what did Rama do? He wanted to take Sita away from Rama.
Hmm.
He already had Mandodari, who was one of the most beautiful women in the whole universe, right? And had many other wives. But he had already, women that are almost equal to Sita, right? Almost, not equal to her, but almost. But he wanted to take Sita away from Rama, so he would not have her. That's enviousness. It's terrible. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. Sorry it went so long. Actually, I enjoy hearing the homeworks. I also learn from it. Hare Krishna.